Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Helen Marley. So many teachers have asked me, how do we get our students to play musically, to play technically fabulously well, and to engage the audience in their playing, as well as really enjoy the pieces that they're playing themselves? I call this artistic personality, and it really all begins with students listening to themselves play, as well as knowing the physical gestures or the movements in the body that must be used in order to play the piano well. Physical gestures is any movement from the fingers, the hands, the wrist, the forearm, the elbows, the upper arm, the torso, right? The back. Oh my goodness, how the students are sitting at the piano bench and with their feet firmly on the floor. So this entire playing mechanism or apparatus is what creates the movement at the keyboard. So we call those physical gestures. Touch releases are also physical gestures, but touch releases is really how the student approaches the key, plays the key, and releases from the key. So that's why I call these a touch release. The touch releases that the students learn through succeeding at the piano are drip, drop, roll motion, the tissue box, the woodpecker, push off touch release, as well as the kickoff touch release. So let's take a look at two very wonderful sonatinas that students play very often. And let's talk about the physical gestures and touch releases needed for these sonatina movements. So the first one is actually in Sonatinas Book 2 from Succeeding with the Masters in the Festival Collection. And this piece is the very first one in the book, the Sonatina in C major by William Duncombe. I'm going to start with the first movement, and I'm going to play it completely straight through. And so no beautiful inflection of the phrases, and really nothing to do with physical movement at all, except for just playing the notes. So the student has the correct fingering, the correct notes, the correct rhythm, but what is not there are any articulations, no phrasing, and no artistic personality. So the very basic motion in all playing is the drop and the roll motion. And of course, we call it the drip, drop, roll because the drip starts from above the key and then the student drops into the key. So let's go ahead and listen to the first line of this piece while using drops and rolls. Drop, roll, drop, roll, drop, roll, keep rolling off. Isn't that interesting? You notice the left hand is legato through this entire piece. So if it's too much for the student to coordinate both hands, and they are doing the same physical gestures, we could concentrate on only the right hand. Roll, roll, and then roll at the end as well. So we want to make sure that our students do not use the physical gestures of bracing, gripping, or squeezing. We get this by telling our students to play on their fingertips or curve your fingers. Not good idea. Definitely not a good idea. But do you notice that the student or I look very tense, and I'm going to get a lot of pressure and tension underneath my wrist and my forearm. So we want to make sure the students are playing on the pads of their fingers, and they're using these knuckles at the top of the hand to move from. Another drop, and then another roll, another drop. All right, so another way to have your students understand the physical gestures that are needed is ask them about the beautiful sound that it creates when the student drops and then rolls forward and off the keys. It's a beautiful tapering of the phrase. Right, now we can have fun and say, why don't we do the exact opposite? So we know where the drops and the rolls are. Why don't we do them the opposite way? So we'll go roll, and then drop, then a roll, and then a drop. Wow, that is so hard to do, right? So if the student plays it incorrectly and we laugh about it, then the student will understand, oh, that's why the physical gestures and these particular touch releases of dropping and rolling make so much sense, right? So it is from physical gestures, experimenting with them, as well as listening to the sound that the student creates. We always want our students to connect the sound with the physical motion. Okay, so now let's say we're playing a little bit louder. I'm gonna do that one more time because I did such a beautiful roll forward and off the keys that I actually rolled my left hand off the keys, but I'm going to keep the left hand legato throughout. You're also going to notice that since the sound has to be stronger, I don't use just a drop and a roll. Now I'm using a gentle push off. So the push off, as you know, is when the wrist moves forward into the keys first and the forearm obviously goes along, and all of this energy and power is coming from the upper arm. And you know me, I am talking always about the upper arm being the powerhouse, and I also call it the free arm because it must be free in order for students to play well. So here is the push-off sound. So the difference is that the push-off is a little bit stronger, right, than the dainty roll off. Good. I always like to say roll forward out of the key because it's just such a beautiful way to interpret really fabulous piano technique. So now the next section is this. So now let's go ahead and look at this B section. All right, so we have to think about what we're going to do interpretively. Do we want really long lines? Or do we want to break the phrases as the composer wished? I actually think it's better to break the phrases as the Baroque era dictates for us. So in this particular physical gesture, I'm going to say that the touch release is only at the end, right? So that we hear the proper articulations, right? So that's definitely a drop and a roll. And this one, drop and a roll. And again, drop and a roll and then a drop. All right. So it makes a difference what physical gestures we use when we think about the phrasing we're going to teach. So what are the physical gestures in those lovely long lines of the B section? Obviously, this physical gesture is rolling in the direction of the keys, and then there's a little bit of a rotation here, right? So the rotation is like this, right? Students are rotating their hand, their thumb, their wrist, and their forearm all at the same time. It's coming from the elbow. Here's rotation, another rotation here, rotation here, and then rotation here again. Another rotation. Another rotation. Oh my gosh, another rotation. All right, so does that make sense? So the physical gestures are really important for the students to feel comfortable at the instrument, to feel freedom at the instrument, and to create the beautiful phrasing that we want. And together. That is really a portato touch. There's a nice tenuto underneath those notes. So it's a deep drop, but it's really a feeling of the student really feels like they stick the landing, right? Like a gymnast who has just done some amazing feat off of an apparatus, right? So they stick the landing and then they feel like they're actually lifting their weight from the bottom of the keys. And that's what a portato touch feels like and what it sounds like.